Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Chakra Way meditation podcast. Today, I'm delighted to have with me Erin Copelan, who is an author. Erin's speciality is all around the energy for caregivers. And there are a lot of caregivers in this world who look after a loved one, a family member, and it is quite an intense thing, I would imagine. I have not been a carer, so I don't know. And this is why we're going to talk to Erin today. Her book, Welcome to Caregiving, The Things Caregivers Never Talk About, has that's a very interesting, tantalizing um, uh, uh, title. So let's get into this. Thank you, first of all, for joining me, Erin. I'm really grateful.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited to be here. When I came up with the title for the book, I went for clear over clever. Just like this is what it is, and all the things we never talk about caregivers. That is what I'm here to talk about. So
Yeah, welcome to caregiving. And this is the thing is that people don't necessarily choose to be a caregiver. It is circumstances in life that create this situation. So tell me about your circumstances. How did you end up being a caregiver? What's your story?
I am a caregiver for my husband, and my husband is a bit older than I am. And so to say it was unexpected doesn't quite sound right. I assumed that as he got older, I would care for him. I
Yes.
didn't expect it to happen when I was 36 years old.
Wow.
And I didn't expect it to be cancer because nobody plans for cancer. I didn't expect for him to have a liver transplant because who in their life ever plans for a transplant? I do think I had learned about organ transplants when I was in high school, when it must have been my driver's education course. And they encourage students and new drivers when they get their licenses to put the little dot on our licenses here to
Yeah.
sign up to be an organ donor. And that's when I remember first hearing about it. And it seemed perfectly natural to me. I put the little dot on my on my driver's license and never
Yeah.
thought about it again. And then all of a sudden they said to my husband, "Well, didn't they tell you you have cancer and you need a transplant?" We were like, "No, that wasn't really clearly communicated to us and was not part of our life plan."
Wow.
So he was on the list for about 8 years.
Wow.
And during that time, fortunately, he never got. Some people end up in the hospital and are living minute by minute waiting for an organ. We were
Mm.
really lucky that my husband was not in that position, but he still had to have a lot of procedures and surgeries to to maintain until he
Yeah.
was able
Yeah.
to receive his transplant. The transplant was successful. There were very serious complications immediately after the transplant, and I almost lost him in that process. But we joke that he is always the exception. So the condition that he had called graft versus host disease, when folks with solid organ transplants get graft versus host disease, 80% of them die, and my
Wow.
husband survived. So
Okay.
it's been a ride.
It
It's
does
been a
feel,
ride.
yeah, very fortunate indeed. And so you had to become his full-time caregiver, I'm guessing, and this sounds like it was, from the diagnosis and being told that he needed a liver transplant to that actually happening was 8 years. And
It was.
what were
And
you doing before? Did you have a career? What were you doing?
I worked in real estate for a long time. During the bulk of this time, I was a massage therapist. I'm still a massage therapist.
Mm.
And so I had the benefit of being self-employed, so I had some flexibility of schedule. The downside to being self-employed was that if I wasn't working, I wasn't making any money. So it's whenever anybody has major medical happening in their lives, I have not talked to a single person, a single caregiver, a single patient who said that part of it was easy. there's always some bit of navigation that has to be done to manage finances and insurance, and there's wills and there's advanced directives, and it's an entire world that is in a language you do not understand. That you
Yes, I
have
mean,
to,
I
it's like
don't know
learning a
what half
foreign
of those,
language.
I don't
All of it.
understand what half of those things are. I mean, they may be in American
Oh,
law anyway, but still, it seems like a hell of a lot.
it's a lot.
And so, in your book, The Things That Caregivers Never Talk About, what is the number one thing that caregivers don't talk about, or that people like myself who are not a caregiver would not expect? What's the sort of the biggest headlines that you have learned in your time?
For me, it was the trauma of caregiving. And it is actually, for me, and I believe most caregivers, it's living a trauma every single day. And there's different levels of that. For me, one story I love to tell is just filling the pill box. It sounds so simple, just filling the pill box for the week. But the weight that that carried, knowing if I didn't do the pills right, if I mixed pills up and put them together that weren't supposed to go together, my husband could die. And so the pill box it was a life or death situation
Wow.
every
Yeah.
Sunday morning, every Sunday morning. And you think you're acclimating to it and you think you're just coasting along to it. But what I have learned, and I've learned even so much more since I wrote my book, is that those little traumas, they start to build up. And if we don't find a way to release them, if we don't find a way to address them, if we don't talk about them, if we don't move through them, if we don't feel the feelings, they take residence in our bodies.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so the mental and physical recovery for me was about twice as long as it was for my husband,
Gosh, really.
because he was recovering physically from a very major surgery. He
Mm.
also had drugs. I did not I did not give me the drugs that they gave him.
Yeah, the good stuff. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
And I didn't have the tools at that time. I didn't know about somatics. I didn't really know about the chakra system and feeling into my body. And I just held this belief that if I really leaned into the feelings that I was having, that they would take over.
Mm.
And so as caregivers, we don't talk about it because really it's about the patient. So we don't want to feel like we're whining or complaining, and we don't talk about how hard it is, and we don't talk about the toll it takes on our mental health and our physical health. And we don't talk about when the to-do list gets like 2 miles long, the first thing to go is our own self-care. We don't talk about any of those things.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the most important thing to start talking about, so that this entire underserved community knows that they're just not alone. They're not alone. There are thousands and thousands of people going through the same thing, but silently.
Mm. And I mean, I suppose also in a small way, your husband happily, the transplant was a success. He recovered, but there are millions of people out there caring for people who are never going to get any better, whose condition is a permanent situation. And in those cases, it must be the toll of that. This is never going to end. Um, could be, absolutely devastating in terms of your energetics. And I can totally see that basically what you're living in is a high level stress constantly. It's that pillbox thing was just like, I can totally see that responsibility gives a little peak, but you never actually come down to stasis. You never come back to your normal. You're always at this high level of stress. And that is exhausting on the energetic body and so imbalancing. And so yeah, as you say, self-care is like the number one thing that caregivers probably do not do, because they get, you do your daily thing and you care for your loved one, your patient, and then your self-care is probably just collapsing on the sofa and watching television because you're exhausted, or But what did your self-care look like when you were in the middle of it? What were you doing that wasn't actually doing the job? See what I mean?
The things, and I feel like I saw more of it in hindsight. And so I love to talk about these kind of almost micro doses of self-care, because it doesn't have to be big and it doesn't have to be grand.
Yeah.
It can be sitting in the car at the grocery store for 3 minutes and turning up the radio and listening to the song that
Yeah.
is feeding your soul.
Yeah.
That can be self-care. It's
Mm.
that awareness around what you're doing for yourself. It can be bathing. That counts.
Yes.
It counts. I tell people, I joke, I say, if you get extra points for washing your hair, and you get triple if you blow dry. Because
Yes.
sometimes
Just
that
in
effort
general.
to lift the blow dryer to blow dry hair, like it's sometimes that energy is not there. It is not there. But acknowledging that we are doing these small things for ourselves, being able to sit with your crystals, being able to sit with your energy and go through chakra work, going to visit a practitioner to receive that work so that you don't have to think and do it yourself.
Mm.
It's such a beautiful, beautiful way. I went for a session yesterday. I had an amazing, amazing session. And it energetically, I don't know if we all give enough credit to that work and how powerful it is when we can give ourselves those moments
Yeah.
to balance our energy.
Yeah. And I think this is a really interesting thing about um this energy work. When you say self-care and self-love, people don't know what it means, and they think that it means something much bigger than what you've just described, i.e., just taking a bath, sitting in the car for another 3 minutes and listening to a song that you love. Well, even having for fun, going getting your nails done, or going for a blow dry, or like that. People don't think of that as self-care. They just think, oh, that's just self-indulgence, or it's selfish, or it's and self-care looks like, something much bigger, like going to 3 yoga classes a week, or reading lots of books, or I don't know, doing something that's much
Vacation.
grander.
Yes, it's become synonymous with pampering, I think, and it
Mm,
is not that. Pampering can be self-care, but
yeah,
self-care doesn't have to be a big pampering thing. And so
yeah.
I feel like it's gotten um I don't like using the word, honestly. I don't like use I talk in my book, I talk about taking the pause,
Right.
because I don't like to call it self-care, because I feel like people used to say to me with just the kindest hearts, they would say, Erin, what are you doing to take care of you?
Mm,
And sometimes I wanted to choke them.
mm,
Because it was like, please don't add something else to my list. There's no
yeah.
space. The page is full. The ink is dry. There is nothing else. And so I go back and talk about, okay, but what are you already doing? We really are doing things for ourselves and not giving ourselves credit for it,
Yeah.
and not being present in what we're doing. And so those moments of presence when you are taking the shower,
Mhm.
paying attention to the scent of your shampoo, smelling the soap, like, okay, here I am, instead of, our minds are boom, 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 all over, all over, all over. And we're not present.
Yeah. But that's the same for everybody. I mean, whether you're a caregiver or just or not, I think that noticing, that awareness, that mindfulness of this moment, of the warm water on your skin, of of the sound of the music and the emotions that it makes you feel, or whatever it is the trick of it is all in the knowing, the catching yourself and telling yourself, oh, this is a moment. This is where I'm having a little bit of refilling my own energy. And one of the things that I quite often say to my clients when if I'm doing a chakra reading, and the self-love or the self-care isn't really, is slightly out of balance or not energetic enough, I ask people to go and do one of those great online quizzes, your love language. If you'd ever done
Yeah.
one of those love language calls,
Yeah. Mhm.
and you work out what your own love language is, and they're ostensibly so that you could go and tell your partner what they need to do for you, but actually it's really useful to know that for yourself. So
It is.
if you know your love language is like, I don't know, gifts or acts of touch or something, you can then go and do that for yourself, and actually it's really good to consciously
It's
do
so
it.
true. I recently made that connection as well. I read it somewhere. I was like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah,
And then lo and behold, mine are words of affirmation and acts of service.
yeah, there you
So
go. So do
I'd
you
venture to guess that 90% of the caregivers out there, their top two is acts of service.
Yeah, yes, of course. And so do you use affirmations as a result of having, is that something that you use as a tool to kind of,
I do. I started
yeah,
again, it wasn't a tool. So I do talk about that more now, but when I first became a caregiver, it wasn't a tool that I used.
yeah,
And I absolutely do now. I always looking for things. And I put out a little series for caregivers, you know, of affirmations. And I have a
mm,
couple of videos on my YouTube too of just reading through some of the affirmations and you know, simple things like I did the best. I did my best today. I
mm,
did my best today.
yeah, I love that. Yeah, really powerful, really calming, very soothing. So, I mean, this is always assuming that the caregiver can actually find the time and the energy to do these things. How do you find the time when you're looking after somebody full time? How do you find the time to do this level of
And
self-care?
that
Finding,
is the tricky part. I in the most stressful days of it when my husband was in the hospital after his surgery, I was waking up at we had just moved into a new house.
oh, fun.
And the day we moved in is that the movers were in our driveway and we got a call that said, "There's a liver for you." And we're like, right, right now. My husband said, "It's really not a good time." Took the phone from him. I'm like, yeah, just give us the instructions. Like we will be there.
Oh,
So he went to the hospital and then I was in this strange, completely strange house just with boxes and my cats. So
holy moly. Yeah.
add stress to transplant to becoming a caregiver, just all of the things. But I was up at 5 in the morning to drive out to the hospital to make sure I was at rounds by 7. And I was there all day with him. And the care team was so phenomenal. I allowed myself to come home at night so I could feed the cats and sleep in my bed and then up again. But it really was tiny bits of time. Like I wasn't blow drying my hair on those mornings, but it
Mm,
was those tiny moments of, okay, I'm going to bathe. Okay, I'm going to go through I'm leaving 5 minutes early so I can get my Starbucks. I am I am making time to go to the bathroom.
mm,
I mean it and they are microseconds. They can be microseconds.
mm,
And what goes hand in hand with that and I'm not the kind of caregiver that asked for help. I was so bad at it. So bad.
yeah, this is going to be my next question, because you say that the people coming, they're going, oh, you taking care of yourself? And I'm sure that people say, come up to carers and go, just let me know if there's anything I can do. And then they walk away and you're like, it's a really difficult. How do you ask for help? How do you get the help and
Yeah,
support?
so I didn't know what to ask
Mm,
for. That was not, I mean, number one, I had a lot of codependent tendencies,
mhm,
which some of those made me a fantastic caregiver,
I'm
also
sure.
made me
Mm,
sacrifice myself
mhm,
completely.
yeah.
And so I've done a lot of healing work in that area and I'm much better now about asking for the help or at least receiving it. So some people, and now the technology is even so much better than when I was in the middle. Now there are things like food delivery, grocery delivery, there's Netflix. There's so many things that just were not there. I actually put together a free download that is 10 ways to support a caregiver. And it helps caregivers because it gives them some ideas, and some say, hey, can I help you with something? But it helps people, if you know a caregiver, you can pop on there and I just tell people, just do something
Yeah.
for them
So what's on that?
because
Because my instinct, if that was me, if I was caregiver, the first thing I would say is like, just bring me food. I don't want to have to cook for myself. I don't want to have to think about what I'm going to buy and cook and eat. Just bring me a lasagna and I'll be happy or whatever. Is that on the list? Because
it
I would.
is. Food is I have a whole chapter just on food because that
Mhm.
really, if that was a love language in the love language book, that
Yes,
would be
that would be mine.
my love language. It would be food. It
Yes.
would be food. Even things like, hey, I heard this song today and thought of you and texted them the song. So much of I just wanted to be seen, and that would fuel me. But people get nervous. I don't want to bother them. They might be resting. They might, and everybody starts to tiptoe. So saying, hey, I'm
Yeah.
thinking of you. Hey, here's a playlist. Here's a little gift card. Hey, do you need to run out to get your hair done? I'm around next week if you need me to stay home with your husband. Um,
Yeah. Just
so many things.
things. And and it is really hard to ask. And I especially for caregivers who I am sure, because you already pointed out, and it's really interesting because that's not something I thought about, the fact that a caregiver already has these tendencies of, the acts of service and the codependency and people pleasing and all of these kind of things that are really common traits amongst all of us. However, like, even if you're not one of those things, then you get put in a position where you're having to be a caregiver. But it's interesting to me that you say that that's a thing that is quite a common, maybe it's something that happens over time once you have to become a caregiver. I don't know.
It was interesting. Somebody asked me that specific question. I was speaking to a support group last month, and they said, "Were you always like this?"
Yeah.
Or did caregiving make you like this? And it made me laugh. And I said, no, no, no. I was always like this. I came out of the womb this way.
Yeah.
And and there are some people, I feel like there is a large percentage of caregivers who really are similar to me, because I also know some people who just are not caregivers. Like they somehow kind of tap out of the situation. Either there's a sibling that takes over for them, there's another family, like they just cannot do it. They just cannot do it. And I've heard stories from that in families. Um, and so it's not something everyone can do. It's not
No.
a role everybody chooses to step into. And so therefore I think we do end up with a lot of common personality traits.
Yeah. And I suppose for those people who are just not that way inclined, who are not willing to take on this burden and this load of work and emotional trauma that caregiving is, they will call in a professional. They'll call in a professional caregiver. And I would imagine that those professional caregivers. So have you talked to professional caregivers, people whose job it is? Is it very different for them energetically? I'm imagining that
I
maybe.
have not talked to a lot of professionals in the nursing industries, and I immediately think of, long-term assisted care living. I do know uh, one person that I talked to, and the person who asked me that question about whether I was born this way or caregiving made me this way. And they shared a story about their mother who worked in that profession. And now that she's out of it,
Hmm.
she's going through massive healing from living these traumas, and with multiple people and with multiple personalities and in that
Yeah.
environment. I can only imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that the other thing that comes up for me, so um I'm not sure that I'm cut out to be a caregiver, or I'm just thinking back to when my husband had an issue, health issue, and he was really worried. It was really stressing him out, and he was kind of getting crabby with me, and I was just like, I am not. This is not what I signed up for. Really not, that doesn't reflect well on me at all. I get it. But um I did my best in terms of, like, caring for him, and I supported him throughout it. But there was a well of anger inside me. It's like, just because you're ill doesn't mean that you can treat me like that. That was kind of, maybe that was a sort of specific situation. And we have since ironed it all out and we're all good, so it's fine. But there is there's two sides to this. First of all, there must be a resentment and an anger sometimes from a caregiver who can't go and live a normal life and go to go and do whatever their mates are doing, or feel carefree, I suppose. But then there's also dealing with, and I'm sure this is not uncommon, um, that I think people who are poorly, the people who are being looked after, when you're in that position, it can be um, it can spark up some quite negative things. The patient can be angry as well. We've got these two sides of this happening, where there's anger from both directions. Now, obviously, you can talk to about the feelings of anger with the patient, but also how to, I don't know, perhaps how to deal with an angry patient, because I think that energetically dealing with anger, I mean, anger is just fear disguised as a grr. And we all, we don't all know that. We just see an angry person and just go, ew, I don't like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I just wanted to back up just one second because I know we talked for a moment about the folks that aren't necessarily craving to be caregivers.
Mm,
And when I talk about that, there really is no judgment in that
mm,
because we're all different and we all do our best and
yeah,
it's not because there is a lack of love, there is not a lack of compassion.
no,
It's just how we as humans can show up in the moment. Sometimes you can show up as a caregiver for one person and
mm,
you can't do it for another
yeah,
person.
yeah,
So that it's all a very human experience. So there is no
mm,
judgment if you have not stepped into a caregiving role and that isn't your
yeah,
jam,
no, you're
there's
right. That is
that's all
interesting.
it's all good.
Yeah,
um the anger is very real. The anger is very real. And I feel like if you can't kind of navigate those self-care parts, that's when the resentment can start to creep in because that resentment really comes from unmet needs. So if it's not being met somewhere else, if you're not able to fulfill that some way, either within yourself or somewhere, that's when the resentment is going to come. But you have the anger, you have resentment, you have guilt, you have grief, because even in my situation, my husband recovered, but you're grieving perhaps your career that has had to be put on hold. Perhaps it's vacations you wanted to take. In my case, my husband almost died. I didn't know if he was dying. My brain played the story that he was dying. And
yeah,
so my body reacted with grief,
mm,
even though it hadn't happened yet.
yeah,
Because our minds do, our bodies just react to what our brain is telling us, whether it
yes,
has happened or not happened, whatever
mm,
the story is, our body is reacting to that. So you have all of those emotions that are happening. Nobody talks about. And the grief is a sneaky one. The grief is a sneaky one because it
mm,
can be perceived grief, but we're still going through that loss.
yeah. And so how do you deal with those feelings of anger and grief? Like, let's stick with this thing of anger and resentment, which is a pernicious emotion. Resentment is will eat you up from the inside out, and it's a horrific thing. And I, speak personally because I lived with resentment for a number of years. And this is probably why I got into the work that I do, to try and heal from that. So I know what I do to heal from resentment, but when you're in the moment and you're still dealing with this patient and you're still having to put your life on hold and say no to opportunities and say no to having your own life, I guess would be the best way of putting it. How on earth do you deal with that? Because that's big. That's big stuff.
And my advice, and it sounds very simple for me, it took me years to practice it, years to learn it,
Mhm.
and years to trust it, is to allow yourself to feel the feeling. Because we will take that anger and we will shove it down. We will shove it down to places we didn't know it could go that deep. We will
Yeah, we will.
and we'll put whatever else on top of it, and we'll just keep shoving it down, pushing away and pushing it away. And
Yeah.
that was probably the emotion that I was like, if I feel the anger, because I knew there was so much just from life.
Mm. Yeah, just
Caregiving
like the
is the
simple,
icing on the cake.
just the life's not fair. Why me kind of anger is enough.
And I was afraid that if I felt it,
Mm,
it would consume me.
mm.
And so to tell people, oh, just feel the feeling. So first time someone said it to me, I was like, you're insane. You have got to be insane.
Exactly. The
You're
first time
crazy.
someone said that to
Feelings
me, I
are
was like,
not meant to be felt. We hide them. We smile. We do not cry. We are not mad. We shove it. We just shove it places.
yeah, yeah. The first time
And
somebody asked me to or told me to feel my feelings, my internal dialogue went crazy. I was like, what are you talking about? How ridiculous. What on earth is I was just so resistant to the idea. But it's the most powerful and important thing you can do.
so powerful. Because in that, and when you really, and I'm still practicing, I'm still
Yeah.
learning, I'm
Oh
still
yeah.
practicing.
The
And
forever
when you get
practice.
into it, and that's where the somatic work comes in and that movement work,
Yes.
because then when you can feel it and you really feel it and you let yourself shake with anger, people say, oh, I was so angry, I was shaking. That is your body adjusting and releasing it. It's
Yeah.
amazing if you can shake with anger,
Yeah.
if you can cry, if you can move, if you can yell into the pillow, if you can physically shake it out, let it out, that's when you're releasing it. And that's when it has least opportunity to stick in your body. Because
Mm.
when it sticks in our bodies, that's when we start getting sick.
Yeah.
That's when we start getting chronic illnesses. That's when we start aching. That's when we start fatigue. That's when we start all of the things that the doctors can't explain. You're like, I feel like crap. I don't know why. I'm tired. I'm this, I'm that. And the doctor's like, well, I did all the tests. There's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the doctors don't test for that,
Right.
unfortunately. I think
There is
it's
no test. There is no test.
but you're so right. And I'm so glad you brought that up. The somatic work is so powerful. And it is somatic is one of those words that is very generalized. It can mean so many things, and it can mean simply like just moving your body, this like just punching the air, punching the pillow, like anything. But it can also be yoga or tai chi or going for a run or swimming or like whatever you do that makes you. And a lot of people go, running's, you're just running away from your feelings or something. No, whatever allows your body to feel in flow and feel connected with itself and for the mind to go quiet, whatever that is, it's going to be powerful. In the same way that creative projects can also put you in that sort of state of flow, where your mind isn't thinking, where you lose track of time, which is the same as meditation. All of those things just allow your body and your mind to process, for these things to flow through you. I always think of it as kind of like opening the back door. Like you've got all these emotions that have come in the front door, and they're like, right, we're just going to set up camp here. We're going to, build a whole house, a whole village, and we're just going to get on with living here. And there's these emotions, and we're putting down tarmac roads, and we're making ourselves at home here. But actually, if you can on a regular basis open the back door so that these things can blow out, breath work is the other thing that I think is incredibly powerful in terms of somatic work. The breath has such a powerful thing to, give to our nervous system and to our energetic body.
And so easy in those minutes that you might be sitting in the hospital, in the minutes when you wake up in the morning, right before you go to bed. Breath work is one of those micro self-care things that you can fit into places
Yeah,
that care
yeah,
for yourself.
exactly. Just learning a technique. The two techniques that I really like are, and I've got them on my Instagram, so you can hunt them down if you want to, but look them up. Brahmari bee breath, which is that humming breath. Where have you ever done that, where you close your ears and you take an inhale and you just hum your exhalation? Beautiful. And the other is the alternate nostril breath, Nadi Sodhana breath, which is deeply cleansing and balancing and just hits the reset. And I would imagine that, for anybody in any kind of stressful situation, but especially this really long-term stress, this just is very attritional is the word I want to use, that it feels like to me, it just constant wearing away at your surface. To rebuild yourself with just 5 minutes of breath work could be really, really powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the other thing that comes to mind when I think about being a caregiver is that it must be quite lonely and it must be quite isolating, and your friends don't quite know what to say. But are there good communities out there that support caregivers? Are there groups and things like that that people can join?
There are, and my thoughts just went. So there are, and I know that at some point in time, one of Jerry's doctors, I'm sure, handed me a pamphlet that
Mm,
said, "Here is a group that you can go to." Most of the hospitals will have some kind of referral to a program. Support groups were hard for me because I didn't want to feel like I was complaining. So I didn't want to go to a space where I felt like I was possibly complaining. I
mm,
also didn't have the capacity to set a boundary so that I was not trying to care for all of the people in the room.
ah, yeah. Oh my
So
God. Imagine a lot of the caregivers together, all just looking
that
after
was
each
really
other.
hard for me. And so I didn't go. So I
Mm,
didn't use that as a tool, which
okay.
is one of the reasons why I wrote my book, because I'm like, there are people out there like me that just choose to sit in isolation. And so I
Mm,
wrote my book. And then because there's still this desire for community, but these interesting parameters, I call myself like a desert tortoise. So our little shell, that's the kind of caregiver. Like, you come near me, I pull into my shell and I will hiss at you and all the things. And so I'm actually creating a program and creating a community that has these kinds of resources and these kinds of tools so that caregivers, they can come for the monthly meeting when I show up and chat. And so if they want to be there in that space, that they can, but they're not required to share, and they're not required to engage in that way. And also when it's 3 o'clock in the morning and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm spiraling.
mm,
And I know there's resources there, but I don't know what to do with myself. Or I did journaling and that didn't work. What else can I do for myself?
yeah.
You'll be able to pop into the portal and say, like, okay, here's different things that I can try to bring myself back to center, to align my energy, to get back to me. So I'm in the process of creating that right now.
Yeah, that sounds really beautiful. Okay, so Erin, tell people where they can find you. And I'm assuming that Welcome to Caregiving, the things caregivers never talk about by Erin Copelan, is available where all good books are found. Is that about right?
Yes, yes, it
Good.
is mostly Amazon, and it's in paperback, ebook, and I've recorded the audiobook for that. So
Well
if you
done.
enjoyed chatting and listening to me today, you can get the audiobook version
Yeah,
if you
but
wish.
audiobooks are great because you don't have to sit down. You can do it whilst you can listen to a book while you're driving, while you're walking the dog, while you're doing the housework. It's invaluable. I only ever listen to books on the whole, especially fiction. But anyway, that's by the by. Sorry, we're getting off on a tangent. Tell people they get hold.
ErinCopelan.com. That is where you can find all things Erin, and that's Erin with an E, Copeland, no D. And I have a whole resource page that has my book, and everything I've created is there.
Yeah. Well, Erin, thank you so much. It's been really interesting. And I really hope that this conversation becomes a source of comfort for people who are caring, because I think that this is a really, really important work. And I think, all caregivers need this kind of energetic support and knowledge of what they're going through, their bodies are going through, what their energetic bodies are going through. So thank you for doing this work. It's
My pleasure.
really,
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me today.